Yes. So welcome back, everyone. It's a people track, just reminding you. And our next speaker is Jenny Martin, an agile coach and trainer. And she's here to talk about nonviolent communication and how you can use it to build trust, develop better quality relationships, and resolve conflicts. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Roman. Hi.
I'm giving stage to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to talk to you today about what the fuck is nonviolent communication? What is it? Why is it important? And how do I practice it at work? And I guess I'm always interested in this kind of stuff. I love this Rumi quote here. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And I guess this sort of sings to me because I always want to see the best in people. I've never really believed that people are born bad or evil. I kind of think that mostly we're kind of navigating the world, trying to do our best, thinking that we're good people, trying to get our needs met. And if we treated each other a bit more with kindness and compassion, then we'd all be better off. So I'm hoping that you come away from today with some curiosity about how to spread compassion and understanding in your workplace and life, and perhaps some tools and techniques to help you do that. So here's a statistic from PerkBox from last year. Nearly 80% of us in employment experience work-related stress. And the most common cause of stress at work is work-related politics, 37%. So this is really showing how relationships and communication and kind of angst at work affects our kind of psychological well-being. And we want to be happy at work and have effective teams. So what makes a happy team? You've probably all heard of Google's really famous Project Aristotle, which established that the single most valuable characteristic contributing to team performance was psychological safety. So this is a thing, isn't it, that we've started to talk about recently. So to create a psychologically safe environment, we need highly trusting, inclusive environments, but we also need to remove the psychological hazards that create stress and try and promote empathy and compassion. And this is where nonviolent communication comes in. So what is it? Well, it's the kind of lifelong work of this man, Marshall Rosenberg, who's a deeply passionate man, deeply compassionate man, worked lots in mediation and resolving conflict in his neighborhood and did all sorts of difficult mediations and went on to spread this world of nonviolent communication across the world. And it really is a language of compassion. So it's a way for people to speak in ways that foster greater connection, greater understanding and compassion. And what do we mean by non-violent? So here's Gandhi, who's one of the most famous leaders of the non-violent movement in the early 20th century. If we think about violent communication, and violence meaning acting in ways that result in hurt or harm, violent communication might be bullying, blaming, discriminating, interrupting, judging, criticizing. You might call all of these things violent. So the opposite of that is about kind of a conscious compassion and authenticity, really thinking about how what we say contributes to the connections that we make, how to kind of share power with others rather than use power over others. So how does it work? Well, this is a real, I'm going to take you through this sort of whistle-stop tour of this really famous book. nonviolent communication. And I'm by no means an expert in this at all. Very much kind of intrigued and curious about it and learning about it, not practicing it in all of my communication by any means. But hopefully you'll be intrigued and read more after the talk. So nonviolent communication is about these 4 key steps. It's actually quite simple. So observation, feelings, needs, and requests. So observations, these are the concrete things that we observe that affect our well-being. And then kind of translating what we observe into our real feelings that we notice. Then connecting our real feelings with our kind of deeper psychological needs that may or may not be being met. And finally, requesting others to kind of enrich our lives, is what Marshall says, in terms of starting to move towards mutual needs being met. So let's start then. Observation. These are the concrete actions that we observe that affect our well-being. And this is the bit, I think, that I find the most useful, because it's difficult to kind of structure your conversation in all of these 4 steps, but it's more about thinking about what we're doing. And this first very important step is about separating observations from evaluations, which is actually quite hard. So we're trying to move away from generalizations and judgments and keep to, recording observations in our minds of what people are physically doing and saying and hearing them, rather than trying to assign value or judgment to them. So it's about saying what we see, what we hear, what we notice, but not what we think of it. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of where we kind of get this wrong in our everyday language. Firstly, so there's a few examples here of evaluations versus observations. So the first one, you're too something. This is loaded with evaluation. So Jenny, you're too trusting. Something that I get from time to time. The observation would be, Jenny, when I see you agree to pay for the work without doing a background check, I think you're being too trusting. So there's a difference there. Another one, when we use verbs that are evaluative or a structure like that. So Jenny is risk averse. That's again an evaluative kind of judgment. The observation would be, Jenny raised concerns about potential issues in the last 3 weekly status meetings. So that's a pure observation. Words about ability. Jenny's bad at tennis. I've just simply lost the last 40 games of tennis that I've played. So that's the observation. Always exaggerations. This is something that I notice in my own language, and you realize when you kind of look at this stuff, how it can get other people kind of a bit worked up. So you're always busy. The observation would be, the last 3 times I asked you to come to the pub, you said you were busy. Same with never. You never call me. I cannot recall you ever calling me. We have to even be careful with often and frequent. So you can see just with that really little example how when we use that evaluative language, the other person is immediately kind of defending themselves from that. So we're trying to avoid that. The second component then is expressing how we're feeling. This is a bit of a funny one, isn't it? Because we're often a bit worried about expressing our feelings at work. Leave your emotions at the door used to be something that was going back a little while, hopefully not so much of that now. But part of psychological safety is feeling that you can be yourself and show up and be yourself, and even be a bit vulnerable. And when we're emotionally intelligent, this is about understanding our emotions and learning how to manage them. So this step in NVC is about being able to name or identify our emotions and acknowledging them, paying attention to them. And this is going to help us connect more easily with each other, because we often think we're expressing our feelings and we're not. In my larger talk, I do go into a lot about the background of psychology of some of these bits, but so let's think a little bit about feelings and emotions. So they're there. Paul Ekman, really famous researcher in emotion back in the kind of late 20th century. They help us take action. They're central to survival, governed by the real central lizard part of our brain. And there's not an awful lot we can do about them. And Ekman has identified these 6 key universal emotions that are experienced by all cultures, transcending geography, culture, and religion. And there's been loads more research more recently on human emotion, but this is still pretty well respected research. And so nonviolent communication helps us build a vocabulary of feelings and distinguishes between actual feelings, like these kind of thing that are captured here, and statements that describe thoughts, assessments, and interpretations. And here, these facial expressions, this is part of Ekman's research, these universal facial expressions that kind of combine our physiological response with, how others see us. So let's look at some differences that we typically make when we're confusing non-feelings, as in thoughts, from real feelings. And these are the ones that have this sort of physiological attachment to them. So, I feel that you don't love me. Whenever we're using I feel that, or as if, or like, we're actually talking about, we could replace that with I think. The actual feeling is probably sadness. I feel like I didn't get a fair deal. I feel frustrated, disappointed. So you're doing this interpretation and evaluation by saying those things. We do it to ourselves as well. I feel inadequate as a tennis player. Inadequate isn't really a feeling. It's a thought that might be due to disappointment or frustration. I feel useless as a product owner. What's that about? Is it frustration, exasperation, disappointment? And this one is something that I'm really trying to change in the way I express myself. I was feeling quite pleased with myself a few years ago about how direct I was, and I was able to tell people how I felt. And I realized when I kind of got back into this book that a lot of me saying how I felt was still projecting back at that other person. So I feel ignored is like saying, you're ignoring me. The feeling is actually could be about hurt or loneliness, or I feel misunderstood. Again, that's not really a feeling. It's pointing back at the other person. And so whenever we do that, so I'm a bit ahead of myself, whenever we do that, we're starting off a conversation with the other person who feels like a good person, is immediately on the back foot and feeling they need to defend themselves or explain themselves rather than listening to what you need. So on to the third step then, the needs, values, and desires that create our feelings. So this is a bit about how we're wired. We're all very much wired differently. A lot of that is to do with our genetics, our DNA, perhaps half of it in terms of our personality comes from that. And so, we have our psychological needs are very much governed by how we are and how we see the world. And what this third component and MVC talks about is the acknowledgement of the root of our feelings. And it heightens this awareness about, this really ancient quote about people being disturbed, not by things, but the view they take of them. So this is about how we choose to receive what others say and do. So what other people say and do may be the stimulus, but not the cause of our feelings. And NVC is about accepting, taking responsibility for our feelings. And the more we do that, the more likely we're going to have this mutual, respectful, compassionate conversation. So a little bit about basic psychological needs. There's been studies about human motivation and needs going all the way back to, back at the beginning of positive psychology, you might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This research from Edward Deci and Richard Ryan is from the 80s, 1980s, about self-determination being, the really important intrinsic motivator where we're in charge of our own lives, and how these key three elements of autonomy, competence, and relatedness are absolutely vital for our psychological health, that these are essential nutrients for our health and well-being. And there's been a lot of research recently to demonstrate how these basic intrinsic motivators, these psychological needs, actually govern our behavior much more strongly than external things like money or fear. There's been some more recent writing on this. You might have heard of Daniel Pink's famous book, Drive, that talks about intrinsic motivation. And the three that are captured there are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So you can see there's a lot of overlap there. So, we want to be in charge of our own lives, to feel that we're good at what we do, that we're striving, that we're flourishing, and it's important that we have these relationships with those around us. So when we talk about this step of nonviolent communication, it's about recognizing that our feelings are attributed to our own needs rather than pushing that back at somebody else. So we're trying to distinguish between like masking that accountability and sensing our own feelings and needs. So here's an example. Sometimes we just kind of remove ourselves by using things like it and that. So it makes me furious when typos appear on the homepage. The NVC way would be more like, I feel furious when typos appear on the homepage because I want our offerings to look professional. So the feeling attached to the need about, competency. Or I feel because I feel disappointed because you cancelled the meeting. The non-violent way would be, I was disappointed when you cancelled the meeting, or I felt disappointed because I had some things I wanted to discuss with you that have been bothering me. And, that's to do with my need to be appreciated and have mastery, or to keep these relationships, which are important to me. And certainly statements that only mention the actions of others. So when you're late, I feel cross. When you're late, I feel cross because I have lots of important things I need to get on with. And that's this making me, I want to do my job as well as I can. So ahead of myself again. So that's the final bit, the second final bit in terms of connecting with needs. The last bit then is to ask really clearly from the other person, would they be willing to take a very specific action that's going to help meet our needs? Often we are really guilty of being super vague about this, and making loads of assumptions and thinking that other people can get inside our brains. We might use negative language when making requests. So I'd like you to spend less time at work. There's an example in Marshall's book where he's mediating between a couple, and she thinks she's being really clear by saying, I'd like you to spend less time at work. And so her husband goes and joins the golf club. Whereas what she actually wants is, I'd like to spend at least one evening together as a family. Try and be really clear. We can be really vague, like, I'd like you to just let me be myself, and expect other people to understand that stuff. If we really thought about that, what would that be? What could it be? I want you to tell me you won't leave our relationship, even if I do something you don't like. That's clear. And we need to be a bit careful making demands in this step. So I want you to give up smoking. Can sound a bit like a demand. I'm worried about your health. Would you be willing to quit? I'd like to support you. Is there a way that this can happen? So that's like the whistle stop, million miles an hour overview of these 4 steps in NVC. And as I said, if you were to try and like string this conversation together using all aspects of that in one go, it could sound a little bit robotic. But being really aware of those different aspects can help avoid conflict and build better conversations, particularly if you're preparing for a difficult conversation. So let's have a go. I'd be really grateful. This is anonymous. I'd be really grateful if you could go to use this QR code, maybe on your mobile, and if somebody could put this in the chat, that would be really grateful as well. Menti.com and the code 1107214. You'll get to it that way as well. What you'll see when you get there, if you could get there, if you could just click on the love heart for me, and I'll know you're there. See any love hearts coming? Anybody joining? I'm gonna come out of this and show you what I'm seeing. Okay. So we've got a few people joining. Great. So let's just have a go at this. I'm going to whiz through this pretty quickly and see some examples, see what you answer. Okay. So firstly, observations versus evaluations. Addy slammed the phone down on me for no reason. What do we think? Is that an observation or an evaluation? It's a bit of a tricky one because Addy may have put the phone down or slammed the phone down, but the no reason bit is the evaluation, the no reason, for no reason. Next one, Jenny didn't ask for my opinion on the training content. I think that's fair enough. If I'd said, if it had been Jenny never asks me, that would have been an evaluation. Next one. My son always bites his fingernails watching Marvel films. It's that naughty always word. So if I'd have said, when we watched the Marvel film last night, my son was biting his fingernails for 67% of the time, that would have been observation. That naughty always word that we want to try and avoid. Okay, so thoughts versus feelings. Let's have a quick go at this. I feel scared when you say that. Yeah, scared is a feeling, isn't it? Scared is a feeling. Happy with that. I'm sad that you're leaving. Sad that you're leaving. Yeah, that's a feeling. Sadness. I feel unappreciated by my colleagues. So unappreciated is a judgment. It's an evaluation. You've done that. You think you're unappreciated, but that's not a feeling. Okay, next one. Sensing and feeling our own needs versus masking accountability. So you annoy me when you don't clean down the whiteboard. Is that masking accountability or acknowledging own needs? Yeah, masking accountability. So a better way would have been, when you don't clean down the whiteboard, I feel frustrated because I lose 5 minutes of my next workshop and I want to do a really good job. I'm disappointed you won't be coming to dinner because I was looking forward to spending the evening together. Yeah, that one's all right. I'm discouraged because I would have liked to have made more progress by now. Yeah, so discouraged is actually some of these, I don't know. Yeah, discouraged disappointed, frustrated, because I would have liked to make more progress by now. Yeah, acknowledging own needs and feelings, that one's okay. Okay, and finally, clear requests. So I want you to understand me. I just want you to understand me. Yeah, that's not very clear. Clearer might have been, you know, I'd like you to replay what I just said and be confident that you're hearing me. I'd like you to empty the dishwasher more often. Yeah, more often. It's a bit like that naughty always word. So I'd like you to empty the dishwasher on weekday mornings before I go to work. I'd like you to agree to knock before you come into the office. Yeah, that's a clear one. If I'd have said, I'd like you to respect my privacy, that would have been unclear and a bit judgy. Okay, so thank you for participating in that. We talked about these, the first component of the top and bottom of this slide about expressing honestly through the 4 components. We want to try and be open and not afraid to show our kind of vulnerability. Because actually research shows that vulnerability actually makes us appear more human and likable and easier to connect with, and a stronger leader even. Empathetically, receiving empathetically. So this is about listening, you know, it's about really paying attention to what the other person's saying, really putting yourself in their shoes, really allowing others to fully express themselves before turning our attention to solutions or requests, which is hard. It can be really hard if you're in pain or you are in conflict with somebody who's more senior than you and you feel they have more power, or, you know, this can be really difficult. I'm just going to leave you with this little tool. Let me see if I can play this music. Oh, it's gone funny. Hang on. The background's gone funny. Maybe that's not so bad. So in my little book of kindness here, which I sometimes dip into, there's a reference to this meditation practiced by these Buddhist monks. And it's about kind of having compassion for yourself and others. And so please look this up online. It starts by you really thinking about the love you feel for yourself and trying to give yourself compassion, and talking through this, chanting through this, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease. As we extend that through these different stages, we think about people we're close to. How do we extend that feeling to our loved ones, share some of that bright light? And the final bit is extending that to all sentient beings, you know, all of the people in the world, all of the creatures, everybody in our neighborhood and our town, and sending our compassion. May you all be happy, may you all be healthy, may you all be safe, may you all live with ease. So a bit of an abrupt move away from that. I really would recommend, there's loads of that on YouTube. You can find lots of different versions of the kindness, the love kindness meditation. So just finally, spreading compassion is good for you. It's good for our, it's the opposite of stress, kindness. It produces this hormone oxytocin, which reduces our blood pressure and protects our hearts and our immune systems. And our brains, you know, we've heard about neuroplasticity. If we practice this, the stress bits of the brain shrink and the kindness bits of our brain grow. So as we flex our kindness muscles, they grow bigger and stronger. So please go ahead trying to spread some compassion May you all be happy. May you all be healthy. May you all be safe. May you all live with ease. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny. This is indeed really, really important. I would say, especially this last year, right? People becoming self-aware much and much more. I myself suddenly, right, started being on my own for longer, and now I'm starting to get more and more like self-reflection, right? Trying to go deeper a bit in these nice thoughts on the nonviolence and on the good communication. The one question would be, so we're running out of a bit of time, right? All this good, right? Knowing this is good, but what would be your advice to, you know, start practicing it? Like, how do you see the easiest way or any way to do it?
So I'd say the first thing is when you're having when you've got a really difficult conversation coming up. So, you know, it's hard to do in everyday life, but if you're thinking, oh God, I don't know how to have that conversation, using these steps to prepare for that conversation is really, really helpful. So even writing it down, going through the steps, you know, what do I observe? Really trying to see, is it free from judgment? Trying to connect with what you're feeling and what's at the root of it, and thinking about what you actually need. And then putting yourself in the eyes of the other person even, and thinking, well, what would they answer if they were doing this exercise? And actually, if you do that, you can write it down in advance, and you can either use it for yourself or you can facilitate that between team members and get them to kind of go through the process. And it's a process. So that would be the first thing when things are really hard. And then as you get better at it, you start to get better at kind of noticing when you're doing it in your normal communication.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, slowing down and writing things down is definitely a very, very important thing to do. Okay, thank you. This concludes the talk.
I was just going to say, I'll go onto the chat. If anyone's got any questions, I'll go and have a look on the stream chat.
Yeah, and we can also, always don't forget to go to the networking area and make sure that you have completed the checklist on the Umbrella. And see you on the next talk, everyone.